What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHogs42 on the internet. And today, I actually have a random card. I just clicked the Scry Follow Random button and thought, let's see what happens. And it happened to bring up a card that I am very passionate about, that I think is absolutely fantastic, and I think you should probably be running in some of your commander decks. And so I was like, all right, this was kind of a random fancy, and this is now becoming a video, and a podcast episode. So this just is what it is. So this is an edition of the Overthinking MTG podcast, if you're wondering what the heck is this guy yammering about, where myself, HamHogs42, talks about an individual Magic card for usually around 10 minutes or so, but at the end of the day, if I run out of steam around 6, so be it. And today we're talking about Culling Ritual. This card is absolutely bananas. It was originally printed in Strixhaven. It is a sorcery for 2 red-green. Destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. Add black or green mana for each permanent destroyed this way. So what happens is you sweep the board with this, and then for every permanent that's destroyed, it refunds you. So if this is impactful on the board, you get mana back. So if you have a large board state, which makes it amazing in Commander, if you have a lot of little things cluttering the board, you're then going potentially positive mana when you fire this. To say this card is impactful in many situations is not doing it justice. This can completely eradicate tokens. So most tokens that are generated, that aren't copies of permanents in play do not have mana values. And as a result, they get swept up in this. You have situations where a lot of mana rocks, like soul rings and whatnot, and mana crypts and vaults and whatnot, all get swept up and get destroyed with this, which is nothing short of fantastic. And so in the late game, this can be absolutely devastating and really shake a board state, but at the same time, you can use that destruction as ramp, which is also absolutely amazing. So if I spend 4 mana and I remove a dozen things off the board, I now have 12 mana to work with. Positive 8, that seems pretty darn good. In Golgari decks, or in decks that can specifically leverage black or green mana, this is nothing short of amazing. I'm currently running this in a couple of my commander decks, and honestly, the only issue is that when it fires, you tend to be seen as kind of rude. Like, that's really the bottom line. It might be, it can be difficult for your opponents to deal with, and yeah, it's very strong. The other thing that's great is in aristocrat strategies where you want your own creatures to die. If they have death effects, this is destroy, it's not exile. And so if you have triggers that occur when things die, your Zulaport Cutthroats and your Blood Artists, yes, those do die to this effect, but it's usually worth it because they see everything else that dies simultaneously and they all fire at the same time. So needless to say, it's pretty great. This also combos beautifully with a card that I also think is highly underrated and is still legal in Standard. It doesn't quite have a home, but I think it might. And that is Diregraf Rebirth. Sorry for the typing there. So Diregraf Rebirth is a sorcery for 3 black-green that says this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature that died this turn. And it says return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it has flashback of 5 black-green. So the reason that I want to call this out specifically, it's a reanimator card, right? It takes a creature from your graveyard, puts it onto the battlefield. Going rate on that these days is 5. So, okay, why is this noteworthy? Well, with Culling Ritual, you will often kill creatures, especially if your deck is designed to have small creatures in it. And so what happens is you kill a bunch of creatures, and as a result, you get the mana from Culling Ritual, and then Diregraf Rebirth is now cheaper based on how many creatures died. So if 3 creatures died, you get 3 mana back, and you can cast Diregraf Rebirth from your hand for only 2. Also note, the flashback cost is also reduced by the number of creatures that have died. So if at least 5 creatures died when the Culling Ritual fired, or at any point during the turn, I call it the Culling Ritual because that's usually where things get culled, appropriately enough, you end up getting enough mana to cast this from your hand for 2 mana, you reanimate something, and then you can flash it back for 2 mana as well, a black and a green, and then all of a sudden, what you end up with is for 4 mana, you wipe a large portion of the board, if not your opponent's entire board, if they're doing kind of a traditional go wide strategy. Imagine the standard deck right now that is running around. Unfortunately, Culling Ritual is not legal in standard, but like in Explorer, for example, there's like the humans list, or you have mono red, Arcanist, these strategies in, you know, Historic and Explorer that are leveraging a lot of small creatures. You break their back completely, and in the process, you also get to reanimate 2 things on the cheap. That's incredible. And so what I love to do with this is I'll use small mill creatures, you know, like your Death Bonnet Sprouts and your Blanchwood Prowlers, to just hit, and your Undead Butlers, Stitcher Suppliers, those kinds of things, so that they hit the battlefield, mill, and then just are bodies on the board that the Culling Ritual can generate mana off of, and then also possibly ping, you know, aristocrat strategies and that kind of thing. So honestly, this combo is very potent and powerful when it fires. You don't see them together often, especially in singleton formats, but if you built a deck in Explorer or Historic around this combo, you can do some really disgusting things with it. Additionally, in metas where smaller permanents are more prevalent, this kind of interaction becomes stronger. You'll notice like there's a lot of hubbub around, well, actually Fatal Push is a good example of what I'm trying to get at as I'm awkwardly stammering. So Fatal Push is an instant for 1 that says destroy target creature if its converted mana cost is 2 or less. And if you've triggered Revolt, it can hit up to 4. But this is a card that cannot hit a creature that has a 5 mana value. So if you're in a format where you're playing casually with people who run almost exclusively large creatures, this card is terrible. But in a competitive environment, cheap creatures are all over the place. They're very prevalent, very common. And as a result, Fatal Push is an excellent piece of removal that honestly, if you're playing in Modern or Pioneer, you really ought to just have it. It's really kind of that simple, right? If you're in black anyway. And so Culling Ritual is kind of like a mass Fatal Push that refunds your mana right away. Now you need to get to 4 mana, and it needs to not get countered, which in competitive environments, that may be a tall order. At the very least, though, if you're in these colors coming out of your sideboard, this could be very powerful. In the right circumstances, in situations where it can fire, and it can find targets, or well, not targets, but it can find affected permanents, it's going to be legit. And honestly, I've had situations where this card alone has won me games. Even if I didn't have the Diregraf Rebirth or something else to follow it up. I've actually cast out Culling Ritual, got like 8 mana in my pool and passed the turn because I didn't have any cards in hand and nothing to sink the mana into. Which is a little unfortunate, but oftentimes this sweeper is going to give you the effect you want. Honestly, I think this card is nothing short of fantastic. I don't know what the going rate on it is right now as far as the secondary market is concerned, but it's lower than I think it probably should be, kind of no matter what, because I think this card is absolutely fantastic. If you are a Golgari mage like me and you have some decks out there, I would recommend thinking about this. Even in more competitive formats, consider it as maybe a 2-of sideboard option, you know, because there are certain decks where if this resolves, it is over for them. In Commander, you just put it out there. Like this card can be nothing short of insane. The fact that it ramps you as it destroys everything, I love it, frankly. And that's really the bottom line. So if you enjoy this kind of content where somebody just kind of gives you their opinion on individual cards, that's something that I do quite a bit here. So if you're watching on the YouTubes, please like and subscribe. If you're listening on a podcatcher app, whatever that may be, whether Spotify, you know, Apple Podcasts, not iTunes anymore. Anyway, whatever it may be, please follow and leave a 5-star review. It makes a huge difference. Any kind of engagement seriously helps. Even if you want to just tell me in the comments how you think I'm an absolute idiot and you think this card sucks, please do. It helps the algorithm. Please keep it coming. Anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I'll catch you on the next one.